All right, tonight's presentation is the rebirth of Bald Mountain Lookout, and it's being presented by Scott McClintock. He was the director of the California South chapter of the Forest Fire Lookout Association. He is the volunteer coordinator of the Bald Mountain Lookout Project. He was a firefighter for the U.S. Forest Service in 1974 and then went on to San Diego Sheriff's Department for a 30-year career in law enforcement. In 2003, the Cedar Fire roared through San Diego County, and it was then the largest fire in California history. Scott was the sheriff's command officer assigned to write the after-action report for that fire. The stories of the 15 fatalities suffered in that disaster have stayed with him, and now retired, have inspired him to pursue fire safety in the Forest Lookout Association. So here's Scott.
Did the screen come up, Rich?
Yes, it did. It looks pretty good.
Okay, let's do it. Hello, everybody. It's good to be with you, and happy Groundhog Day to everybody. You know what, Rich? The advancer, however, is not going. There it goes. All right. As he said, my name's Scott. I'm talking to you from San Diego County, and it's good to be here to talk about something old on the Inyo National Forest that has had a rebirth. We'll be talking about the Bald Mountain Fire Lookout Station. And I need to point out that project is possible through a partnership with the Mono Lake Ranger District of the Inyo National Forest, and they've been great to work with. And please let me take a minute to introduce my organization, the Forest Fire Lookout Association. We're a 501c3, not-for-profit organization of about 1,300 volunteers across the United States. And we just love lookout towers. We love their history, we love their mission, we love to compare the different architectural designs of lookout towers. And when we mention history and architecture, I like to show one of my favorite pictures of one of the early lookouts. This is up in Oregon, not far from Crater Lake on the Fremont National Forest. We don't have a date attached to this photo, but you notice the Model A down there, and we know those were produced between 27 and 32. So that gives us a pretty good era where this was taken. And when you talk about architecture and lookout towers, you notice they just lopped off a tree, built their little hutch up there, leaned a spindly old ladder up against the trunk. They ran Old Glory up the staff and went to work. But back in those days, the lookouts also were firefighters. So I'll bet in the back of that Model A, there were a number of shovels and axes. And after they would report a fire, they would jump in that old thing and get as close as they could and start the initial attack on the fire. Another one of my favorites, this is Lions Peak in San Diego County, and this one was dated 1915. That little, it would be very interesting to work a shift in there with 40-mile-an-hour winds going on. But it is gone now. Right now, right next to it is a 1960s era steel tower. And I was up there and I crawled up the back of that rock and I could still see the holes drilled in the top of it where that thing was bolted to the top of the rock. But these are some buttes. And here in the history section, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the only other lookout on the Inyo National Forest, and that was Kern Peak. This is way south of you. It's just west of Olancha. It was built in 1915, and it was built the hard way. There was no road to get up there, and there still is no road to get up there, so all the building materials were hauled up by livestock. But we do have this wonderful picture of it here. We love lookouts for the iconic symbols of forestry that they are. In fact, second only to Smokey himself, lookout towers symbolize American forest conservation. At their height in the 1940s and 50s and 60s, there were about 7,000 towers in use across the country. Now only about 2,000 remain, and only 500 of those are staffed anymore. In the 1970s and 80s, however, in the days before unleaded gasoline and industrial pollution controls, air pollution became so bad that visibility was reduced. Coupled with historic budget cutbacks, towers were taken out of service, and most were boarded up and removed from government budgets. And that was before the buzzword of defunded came around, but that's what they did. They defunded the towers back then. And once a line item is removed from a government budget, it's virtually impossible to get it funded again. Most of those 7,000 towers then fell into disrepair, and many were disassembled or destroyed so as not to become liabilities. The FFLA, when possible, will partner with the government agency that owns a tower, make repairs to it, and make it functional again and save it from destruction by putting it back in service and staffing it with unpaid volunteers, thereby costing the government virtually nothing. And at this point, usually some technology-loving person is going to ask, aren't there satellites and drones or cameras out there that can do the same job? And our answer is, well, sort of. Scientists are working on these things. As we speak, they're using artificial intelligence to train computers to watch camera feeds and alert humans when they think they see a smoke. The latest, greatest breaking news is that the people at Google teamed up with a few other tech companies to launch a whole constellation of satellites to detect smoke from space. They launched a prototype satellite last spring and are testing it out. And while they had it up there last summer, it took this shot of a roadside fire north of Medford, Oregon, which was about 550 feet across, and nobody else had reported it yet. So the plan is to launch a fleet of 50, and they don't really call satellites by a fleet. They call them a constellation of satellites. But they want to put 50 of them up there and position them so that one will fly over fire-prone areas every 20 minutes. And that's pretty impressive if it all works out. And that all is expected to be done by 2030. So if it works, and they've gone kind of quiet on the news lately, so I don't know if they've discovered a problem or what's going on with them, but let's hope it all works out. And by 2030, we'll have that constellation up there. And we human lookouts just cannot compete with that, but that's all right. In work and research and spend money like they do, the automated systems do not yet detect smokes as early as a trained human with a pair of low-tech binoculars. And what the machinery cannot do is tell the difference between bulldozer dust, which you're looking at here, and a plume of smoke. And that has the exact shape of a plume of smoke. It's a little off in the color, but satellites, cameras, drones would be reporting that as a fire, and it's not. It's just a bulldozer down there doing his thing. And give you an example of the difference. Last summer, there were some off-road vehicles. I call them dune buggies, but I get reprimanded when I use that term. Those little four-wheel drive buggies that everyone buzzes around in. They were at Smoky Flat, and they were doing donuts and stirring up a bunch of dust. A car was driving down 395 and called it in as a forest fire. Our lookouts up in the tower could look down there with their binoculars and see what was going on. And in the meantime, the Forest Service had dispatched a bunch of engines, a bunch of patrol units, and some bosses were screaming down their code 3 to this, quote, fire. And our lookouts said, no, there is not a fire at Smoky Flats. It's a bunch of off-roaders stirring up dust. And so they called off the response and just sent one guy out to check it all out. And the Forest Service was very appreciative of that because we saved a lot of wear and tear of those big engines hauling code 3 down the highway. They were appreciative of that. Let me turn the page here, and we'll get into some of the good stuff. Achieving early smoke detection is getting more and more critical with each fire season. Wildfires are getting larger, stronger, and deadlier. We can blame this on land management, suburban sprawl, climate change, or on all those things combined. I could throw stats on the screen for a half hour to make my point, but the most telling statistics come from Cal Fire. I didn't make them up. These are from Cal Fire. Here they are. And they're all based on the Cedar Fire back in 2003. That's the one that I worked on. And think back where you were in 2003. Where were you living? What were you doing? Where were you working? Who were you with? And put yourself back in that time mode. And that's when the Cedar Fire came through San Diego County. And there you see its stats, 273,000 acres, 15 dead. And it was from this fire that all these stats are kind of revolve around. And this was the fire that got our attention. This is the one where we said, wait a minute, something's wrong here. Something's different. This was the fire where news crews would stick a camera in the face of some old grizzled battalion chief with a shell-shocked look in his eyes, and they'd say, what's up with this thing? And he'd say, in my 35 years of fighting fire, I've never seen anything move as fast as this one. And that kind of stuff was going on. This is when news agencies were reporting fires in terms of square miles instead of acres. That 273,000, I think that's about 400 square miles when you divide it out. And this is the one that changed everything. So those stats. Here we go. It's right here in the middle of my sheet. I know it is. Okay, the one on the left is about the size of fires. And what CAL FIRE says is 19 of the state's 20 largest fires in terms of acreage have burned since the Cedar Fire in 2003, which is just stunning because when I worked it was the largest fire in California history, and we thought we were big stuff, and now we've slid down to about number 10. The other stat there, of the 20 deadliest fires in terms of fatalities, 14 have occurred since the Cedar Fire in
Scott,
03.
Scott,
Yes.
Scott, this is Rich. It's not changing on our screens.
Yeah, it's the same one. I'm with you.
Oh, okay.
But you do see the fatalities number up on the upper right-hand side?
Yes, we do.
Okay. This is just a long narrative on this slide. So that 14 out of 20 just stuns me because we have improved our technology, our communications, our firefighting abilities, the equipment. In fact, nowadays, most counties have a system where you can sign up your cell phone and they'll call you in the middle of the night and tell you that whether or not you need to evacuate. All of these improvements have happened, but still 14 of those show up on that stat, and it just tears my heart out. And just for up to date, this article came out in August about a study that showed increased temperatures were sucking the moisture out of the soil and vegetation, causing the fire season to start 2 months earlier. So let's get back to Bald Mountain Lookout. Where is this thing? You folks are all locals. You've probably driven down 395, and if you looked east at just the right time, you see it right there. And if you look real close at the top of the mountain, you see a little rectangular bump on top, and that is the lookout from 395. It's between Mammoth Turnoff and June Lakes Turnoff. And as I said earlier, we love the history of lookouts, and here is the only photo we have of the original Bald Mountain Lookout, built in 1943 by the Civilian Public Service. And the Civilian Public Service, they were different than the CCC. They were a band of conscientious objectors that were made to come up and work on government projects like this, but they were different than the CCC. And so that one lasted about 20 years, and then in 1963, they replaced it with the current structure. And God bless them, they built it out of cinder block, so it's withstood that time pretty darn well. And we in the FFLA marvel and cherish at Bald's architecture. It resembles a mini fire station with its apparatus bays and its living quarters downstairs. It's so markedly different. It's so markedly different from the standard cab atop spindly legs, like this sample. I spent many years in that tower right there. So this is Chris Fabro. He's a fire prevention technician assigned to the Mono Lake Ranger District. He's our liaison with the Forest Service. We call him Patrol 11 on the radio. He started his Forest Service career by staffing this lookout in 2001. Since then, he's coordinated multiple lookout programs around the state with the hope of one day staffing Bald Mountain also with volunteers. Then 2 years ago, he and I got in touch and we got things started. The Ranger District approved of Chris and I deploying a trial season using veteran lookout volunteers from other existing programs from all over the state. In the summer of 2024, we drafted 16 volunteer lookouts who are not only well experienced, they were trainers assigned to volunteer programs from the Cleveland, the San Bernardino, and the Angeles National Forests. We called this group our test pilots. They worked for a total of 42 days at Bald Mountain, overnighting in the living quarters and helping us to write procedures manual. On September 17 of 2024, one of our test pilot volunteers spotted and reported this fire, which came to be called the Tower Fire. And I point out that it's bigger now than when he first saw it. We don't have any pictures of smokes that look like the time we saw it because it takes us about 15 or 20 minutes to draw up all the paperwork, call it in to dispatch, and take a lot of metrics on them. So this has grown considerably since the 15, 20 minutes when he first spotted it. And he helped guide the firefighters to it because, as you see, there's no roads out there. And it was suppressed before it could become large and destructive. For this one sighting and the damage that it prevented, the program was declared successful and permission to grow the program was given. So moving up now to the last year, for the summer of 2025, we brought in 43 experienced volunteers. We recruited them from all over the state, working at different towers all over the place. And we made them promise to stay 2 days plus and live there in the tower. Most of them worked 3 to 4 day stints. And we filled the schedule quite well from June 17 to mid-October with only 3 days vacant. And also last year, we began recruiting and training local residents. It's impossible to get interested people together for in-person training classes, so we produced documents and videos and had applicants study from home. The home study takes about 5 hours to consume it all. About 30 residents from Bishop, Mammoth Lakes, and June Lakes answered our call for volunteers and are either in training or will start this spring. And so that's what's happening with our staffing. Now let's take a little tour of the facility so you can see what it's like up there. There's the outside, as you've seen. If we go into the garage, there's our 1,000-gallon water tank. The problem with it, this being so remote, is that the only way we can fill that tank is by fire trucks coming up and squirting straight into it from their firefighting water tank. And that is some yucky water, so you could never drink that stuff, but we use it for cleaning. The volunteers have to bring their own water when they come up there. And here's the inside. This is our living room, what it looks like in there. You see the kitchen back there on the left. Here's a better picture of the kitchen. The stove and the refrigerator run off of propane. And right now our plumbing does not work at all, so no water comes out of that sink. And earlier Ellen was talking about the problems of keeping up with an older building, and yes, I feel your pain because we fight it all the time with our good old gal here. Here's the bedroom. That is a futon couch that folds into a queen-size bed. So most of the lookouts who come up and stay in the tower just fold that out and throw a sleeping bag on top of it in the bedroom. And there's the non-functional bathroom with no plumbing. So outside the place, you see this log cabin. And this is my call for you, the Historical Society. I cannot find the history of this log cabin. I have looked it up and I've used ChatGPT and I've talked to people and I cannot get a satisfactory answer as to the origin, who built it, why, and why it's there. And so if anybody from your group knows anything, I'm putting the hook out there. Here's what the cabin looks like on the inside. This cabin is used as a destination for the snowmobilers in the winter. They come up and they come in and use it as a warming hut. And it's got some food that people have thrown in there, some maps and papers. And then in the summertime, the off-roaders use it as a destination, although they don't need to warm up in it. Okay, let's take a tour of the cab. The little pergola that sticks out of the top, we call it a cab in the business. And we'll take you for a little tour in there where the smoke detecting actually happens. Here's the inside. There's a single bed in there, but it's a long one. In case the other bed's too short, you can go up there. But boy, on windy nights, it is really noisy up there. There's our little bitty desk. And in the middle of the whole room is a pedestal with the Osborne fire finder. And talk about history. These were built in the 1920s. Just about every tower in the country had one. It's named after its inventor, Osborne. And what it does is it gives us the azimuth of where the smoke is burning by looking through the little peep sight in the back, and those are crosshairs in the front side. And when you line up a smoke through the sights, that metal tape that runs across the map on top should be laying right across the fire. But then comes the hard part, and that's figuring out how far out it is. And so we do our best to see if it's in front of this ridge or behind that ridge or where it is in relation to a lake or a mountain, and try to figure out just how many miles it is from the tower. Here's the vernier on the outside that'll tell us the degrees that we're looking at, the azimuth. And then we'll make a little mark on the X where we think it is, take our measurements, fill out our reports, and then call dispatch. And when we do, we tell them we have a whole sheet full of blanks that we have filled in that we give them. But the main things are the azimuth and the distance. So the dispatcher plugs the azimuth and the distance into her computer, and it generates an electronic map. And from that, they dispatch the fire trucks to come out and respond to the fire. And let me get caught up on my notes here. I've just been ad-libbing here. Here we go. The lookouts sometimes called for additional observation as responders make their way to the incident. So we keep an ear to the radio during the response and the firefight. Let's talk about training for a minute. How do we train up new volunteers to do this job? So like I said earlier, we give you a lot of about 5 hours worth of home study that is all online with videos and documents to memorize. For example, 24-hour time. Some people say, wait, I'm not joining the military here. I don't want to say, 300 and 1400, but we don't call it military time. We call it 24-hour time. But we do speak in that way. And so those are just things that you have to memorize. And we tell people we have to train people on all of the physical plant of the station, such as the electrical plant there with the solar cells. We cover the water system, which doesn't work, the electrical and the propane systems. And then radio procedures, lookouts are expected to follow a number of rigid procedures using the Tactical Forest Service channels. Radio proficiency has often been cited as the most challenging part of the training because they expect us to talk like a professional when we grab that mic and start talking. So it does take a lot of training. And smoke recognition, we give people access to an online video that scrolls dozens and dozens of smoke photographs to condition the subconscious memory to react and recognize to the colors, textures, and shapes of young and sometimes distant wildfires. And so here's a lookout test for you all. This is a shot from a lookout tower in, I believe it was Montana. And there was a lightning storm that came through the forest the night before. A downstrike came and lit up a tree. There is a tree burning in this forest somewhere. So the way we do it is we start at the base of the tower and we scan back and forth. We'll take a section just like you're looking at here and slowly and intently go back and forth from the tower on out to the horizon. And I wonder if anyone sees the fire burning. It's a single tree giving off a very light colored smoke. So we'll zoom in a little bit here and see if this helps. Scanning back and forth, looking hard, looking intently. And if I could see your hands raising that you see it, that would be great, but I can't. We'll zoom in one more time here. And there you see just left of center on the horizon line, you see that little white fuzzball. That is a single tree burning and putting out that smoke. So that was your test for being a lookout. Here's the form we fill out before we dispatch of smoke. We have to take all these metrics, fill in all those blanks, and then we call it in. So let me catch up again here. Okay, in addition to smoke detection, volunteers are also tasked with being docents and educating the many visitors who make their way up to the mountaintop. Now, it's rare we get this many visitors up there at one time, but those off-road people like to travel around in packs, and I think 2 or 3 packs all settled at the same time. But we do get a lot of visitors up there, and our job is to greet them and make their experience positive. And if they show interest, we'll give them a tour of the cab. And when we're using all these outside volunteer lookouts, they don't know the area as well as you folks do. So we had to, here we are being nice to people in the cab, giving a little tour. We had to develop some little mini 3-minute videos to train our docents in some of the local lore. So we made a video about the Inyo sand flats. Everybody comes up and asks about those, about Obsidian Dome, about the research natural area, which you're looking at right down on it right there. We tell them about the Monocrater's aqueduct tunnel, and they don't realize that mountain is right on top of an engineering marvel. And we teach them about Crooked Meadows, which is up over that ridge. And we teach them about geocaching. That brings a lot of people up on the mountain also. So we made all those little videos. I would love to make a video on that log cabin and find out the truth about that. So here is my email across the top, Palomar Towers with an S @gmail.com. If anyone would be I'll even accept anecdotal stuff if you have it, but I'd really like to know if there's an official history on that log cabin. Nobody in the Forest Service gives me a straight answer. And Chat GPT did not give me a straight answer, so I'm very curious to learn about that. And also, if you know anybody, as you've seen this slideshow, if you know anybody, your brother-in-law or the young guy down the street, somebody who you think might be interested in becoming a lookout, please forward them our website, firelookouthost.org, and people can go there and find out more about it, find out more about being a lookout, and maybe even sign up for training. There's still time to get you trained up for the next fire season. And we do need the people. We have 30 interested now, but we'll need about 90 before we can staff that thing with 2 people a day for the whole fire season. We only ask our volunteers to work 1 day out of the month, and that shift goes from 9:30 in the morning till 6 p.m. And it's only once a month that you would donate for the safety of the Mono Basin. And that's the show, and I'm happy to take questions if anybody has one.
Oh, Scott, this is Rich Foy. That was absolutely terrific. Everybody out there in Zoom land, you can either raise your hand Zoom-wise. I think you can do that via chat. You can leave a question in chat, or if you'd like to ask it in person, just raise your hand and I'll unmute you. But my question is, in the past I've gone up to a couple of fire towers and visited with the people there. Do you solicit visitation? People just driving up?
Oh yeah, we love visitors because between you and me, it can get boring up there. So we just love people drop in.
That's what I gathered from. I visited them in Hat Creek and down in San Gabriel's, riding my mountain bike up. Let's see. Where is my chat? Okay. Kalani Millar says, I'm sorry if I missed the first 10 minutes of your talk, and maybe you mentioned already the very important role of a recent lookout, local resident Nick Carl, who served before the volunteers. Nick warmly invited visitors to the station and explained not only how the firefighting worked, but shared many stories from his lifelong knowledge of the area. Nick represents the heritage of the long tradition of historic lookouts who knows the landscape like the back of their hand. So, Jenny, Hannah, would you like to, Greg Knight asked, do volunteers get to work in the cab overnight?
They can. If we don't have our out-of-town trainers, because right now we're training people with these out-of-town folks, and so we put them up in the station. But after they have trained everybody and we're on our own and they're gone, then yes, you are very much welcome to spend the night up there.
Wow. Rosa Higgs says, I worked Bald Mountain Lookout in 76 and 78. The log cabin was not there in my day. Holy cow.
That's a start on my history.
Yeah, there you go. Scott, I think you can, if you click your chat, you can also see all of these if you want to follow along. And when would the training be for volunteers? Sorry if I missed that. There's Claire Marvette.
The training is done at home online, and then when the season starts up in June, we'll schedule you days of training with a trainer in the tower, usually 2 to 3 days.
Here's an important question. Is there a quote for the plumbing?
No, there isn't, but I don't know if you've worked with the government before, but that becomes an issue when you spend money on a defunded project. But I'm very open to talk if anyone knows a plumber.
There is an outhouse?
Yeah, we bring up a porta potty during the summer.
So from Modesto, California, Lee and Sue Whitmer saying, thank you, excellent presentation.
Well, thank you very much.
And Jean-La Pouvert, I never know how to pronounce your name, asks if we can donate to you guys.
Yes. if let me give you, thank you. Here's my email again, Palomar Towers with an S at Gmail. If you send me a note, we would be very grateful. And you will hear of us doing some fundraisers this summer. We haven't thought of what they're going to be yet, and I don't want to compete with the Historical Society for those public funds. But yeah, you'll hear us trying to maintain our building. And you'll probably hear our recruiting go out on the radio and TV stations too.
Oh, and one of our trustees, Lori, asks if you talk to Jim Morrow in Bishop, he might have history about the cabin. Carter Morrow worked there for a long time since he passed. I got to be a lookout once in a while in the 80s for 14 summers as a ranger.
Oh, no, I don't know Jim. Or
Oh,
did.
okay. I'll send you a copy of all of this chat so
Already.
you can get the names there. And Chris Speller applauds like all of us for the presentation. Cole,
Great.
you want to wrap it up?
Well, thank you very much. It was interesting. I learned a fair amount. Uh, I'd like to thank everybody who came and watched the presentation tonight and remind you our next meeting will be a Zoom meeting and it'll be on March 2nd by the Woodruffs. And the short title is The Tenacious Women of the Eastern Sierra. And Rich will be sending Zoom address shortly before that. And that's about it. Have a good night.